A wife asks to turn off the life support keeping her husband alive during his coma so she can claim his inheritance after his death, but then this happens. In the heart of the city, where skyscrapers blend with the constant movement of people and cars, lived Robert, a man who, at first glance, seemed to have achieved everything money could buy. Owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, he was a symbol of success and wealth. However, unlike many others who amassed fortunes merely to display power, Robert was always distinguished by his generosity. He believed that true wealth was not just in the numbers in his bank account, but in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. Robert grew up in a humble family, where he learned the value of hard work and frugality. Money doesn't grow on trees, his father would say constantly, teaching him the importance of investing wisely. From a young age, Robert showed a natural talent for business. While many of his friends spent their meager earnings on frivolities, he saved every penny, investing in small businesses that soon multiplied. His passion for building wasn't just a metaphor, he wanted to literally erect buildings, creating something lasting that reflected his values. By the age of 30, Robert was already one of the wealthiest men in the country. His constructions spanned major cities, from shopping centers to luxurious residential condos. He employed thousands of people and, on every project, made sure his workers were treated with dignity. "None of this would be possible without you," he would say in team meetings. For Robert, the company's success wasn't just the result of his skills as an investor, but the collective effort of everyone who joined him on the journey. Robert married Amy, a woman who, to everyone's eyes, seemed like the perfect partner for a man of such wealth and vision. Beautiful, elegant, and always by her husband's side at important events, Amy was seen as the lady of high society. "I am his luck in life," she would say with a smile, while flaunting the finest dresses and jewelry at gala parties. Robert believed he had found true love, a companion to share not only his fortune but also his dreams. But behind the glamour and appearances, Amy harbored a burning desire for more power, more luxury, more control. She never cared for her husband's generous side. To her, Robert's wealth was merely a means to achieve the lifestyle she had always dreamed of. Amy's craving for money was insatiable, and although Robert was keen on investing in social causes and improving the lives of his employees, she saw it as wasteful. "You spend too much on these non-return projects," Amy would criticize him, feigning concern for the company's finances but secretly bothered by any penny that wasn't for her direct benefit. Robert, however, never let Amy's unchecked ambition divert him from his values. He continued to expand his business, always focused on reinvesting in the company and the people around him. When he saw a project succeeding, Robert felt the satisfaction of a true investor who was not content merely with accumulating wealth but with seeing the positive impact of his decisions. With each new building inaugurated, he made a point to be present, shake the hands of the workers, and thank each one for their effort. "This is our legacy," he would say, looking at the imposing structures rising as symbols of his dedication. Despite his fortune, Robert was a man of simple habits. He enjoyed visiting construction sites, chatting with workers, and understanding what could be improved. While Amy occupied herself with spending, he preferred to focus on growth. The company's finances were always under his watchful eye, and Robert had an incredible knack for predicting trends and anticipating crises. For him, construction was not just a profitable business, it was a battleground where only those who knew when to invest and with the right people by their side survived. The respect Robert earned came not only from his financial success but from the way he dealt with challenges and people. His employees regarded him as a fair boss, and his office doors were always open to anyone who wanted to talk. "We're all in the same boat," he would say, fostering a culture of transparency and collaboration. To Robert, a company's economy went far beyond numbers. It involved trust, loyalty, and the certainty that every decision made would benefit everyone involved. Although Robert's life seemed perfect, a shadow was slowly growing in his path, a shadow he couldn't yet see clearly. Amy, who once enchanted him with her beauty and charm, was beginning to reveal a cold, calculating side that Robert, in his kindness, refused to believe. He had his suspicions but preferred to think that love and time would help them overcome any obstacle. Deep down, Robert still believed that the true investment in life was in people, and that one day, Amy would see this too. Robert's life continued at a controlled pace, filled with professional commitments, inaugurations, and ambitious projects that only increased his fortune and reputation. Meanwhile, Amy grew increasingly impatient. No matter how much Robert provided her with the luxury she had always desired, her desire for more wealth and power was limitless. She began to secretly make plans, becoming more obsessed with the idea of being the sole heir to Robert's fortune. For her, it was not enough to simply enjoy the benefits, she wanted absolute control, without having to share her life with a man who, in her mind, was just a tool to achieve her goals. "You're so busy, Robert. You hardly have time for us," Amy complained during a dinner at one of the city's most expensive restaurants. "Maybe you should think about slowing down, investing more in us, in our future." Robert, distracted by the company's financial reports, smiled without realizing the true intention behind his wife's words. "You're right, dear. I'm working on it, but you know we need to ensure everything runs smoothly at the company. It's good for all of us, especially in these unstable economic times," he replied, unaware that Amy's only desire was to hasten a future without him. It was on a rainy afternoon, as Amy looked out the window of Robert's office, that she devised the boldest plan of all. She needed to remove Robert from the picture but without raising suspicion. She knew that a divorce wouldn't benefit her as much as being the widow of one of the wealthiest men in the country. So, on a whim, she decided that the best way to secure her fortune was to engineer an accident. She knew that construction was a dangerous business and that a failure on a site could be fatal. Determined, Amy began looking for someone who could help her put her plan into action. Jeffrey, one of the company's engineers, soon caught her attention. Ambitious and constantly in debt, Jeffrey was the perfect target for bribery. "Looking for easy money, aren't you?" Amy said with a cold smile, approaching Jeffrey during an informal meeting. Jeffrey, surprised by her approach, looked wary. "What do you want, Ms. Amy?" She moved closer, lowering her voice. "I need someone to do a little job for me. Something that will benefit us, financially speaking." Jeffrey, pressured by debt and tempted by the offer, hesitated for a moment but couldn't resist the promise of a generous sum. "What exactly do you want me to do?" he asked, aware that it was something dangerous. Amy, with chilling composure, explained her plan: to cause an accident on the construction site that would look like a common failure, without leaving traces of involvement. Jeffrey knew he was getting into something much bigger than his financial troubles, but the easy money was too enticing. "I'll take care of it," he replied, sealing Robert's fate. The plan was executed with frightening precision. One day, while Robert was making a routine visit to one of the sites, a scaffold collapsed unexpectedly, causing a severe accident. Robert was seriously injured and rushed to the hospital. The news shocked all the employees and the community, who always saw him as an invincible man. Amy, however, maintained an unsettling calm, almost as if she was already prepared for that moment. She cried during interviews, played the role of the devastated wife, but inside, she already envisioned herself as the wealthy widow, ready to take control of everything. At the hospital, Amy wasted no time. She visited Robert daily, always with a carefully rehearsed expression of pain. "My love, you need to come back to me," she said, holding her husband's hand while fake tears streamed down her face. To the doctors and nurses, she was the devoted wife, desperate for her husband's recovery. However, behind the closed curtains, Amy's true plan began to unfold. Each day that Robert remained in a coma was a new opportunity for her to get rid of him once and for all. "He's not responding, doctor," Amy claimed, her voice choked with despair. "I don't know how much longer I can bear to see him like this." The doctors tried to reassure her, explaining that there was still hope, that Robert was strong and could recover with time. But Amy, impatient, pressed harder for a drastic decision. "We can't prolong this suffering," she insisted. Robert never wanted to live hooked up to machines. He's always been an active, full-of-life man. It's not fair to him. Amy's insistence on turning off the machines began to raise some suspicions. Margaret, a dedicated engineer from the company who always had a special affection for Robert, visited him whenever she could. Seeing the pressure Amy was putting on the doctors, Margaret couldn't hide her frustration. "Are you sure this is what Robert would want?" she asked one afternoon, while accompanying Amy on one of her visits. "He still has a chance, Amy. Wouldn't it be better to wait a bit longer?" "You don't understand, Margaret," Amy retorted with an expression that mixed exasperation and false compassion. "It's too hard for me. I love him, but I can't stand to see him like this. Robert would make me promise not to keep him hooked up to machines." Margaret, even though she felt something was off about Amy's haste, decided to respect the wife's space, believing that grief and pain might be clouding her judgment. "Let's wait a few more days," one of the doctors suggested, noticing Margaret's discomfort. "Robert deserves this chance." Amy found herself forced to agree, but her patience was wearing thin. Each passing day was one less day for her to execute her plan and take full control of Robert's fortune. She continued her visits, always with the same performance: tears, promises, and pleas for him to wake up. "I'll do anything, just come back to me," she whispered, knowing full well that what she truly wanted was to see him gone. Amy's mask was firmly in place, and no one at the hospital suspected her true intentions. Days dragged slowly at the hospital, and while Amy continued to pressure the doctors to turn off Robert's machines, Margaret felt that something wasn't right. The engineer had always admired Robert's generous character and couldn't accept how quickly Amy was willing to give up on him. With each visit, Margaret watched Amy more closely. It was evident that Amy's tears were well rehearsed, but no one seemed to question the wife's pain. It doesn't make sense for her to be in such a hurry, Margaret thought, uneasy about the premature widow's behavior. Determined to understand what was really happening, Margaret began to review the details of the accident. Construction was something she knew very well, and the scaffold collapse that injured Robert seemed more than just an unfortunate coincidence. "Something like this doesn't just happen suddenly," she said to herself as she reviewed the site's safety reports. She decided to check the security camera footage from the site, believing she might find a clue about what actually happened on the day of the accident. As she analyzed the footage, Margaret was shocked to see something no one else had noticed: Amy had been at the site on the day of the accident. It was rare for Amy to appear at the construction sites, and seeing her in a discreet conversation with Jeffrey, the responsible engineer, made Margaret's heart race. What was she doing here, she wondered, with a feeling that pushed her to dig deeper. Margaret watched the scene repeatedly, seeing how Amy said something to Jeffrey, who looked uncomfortable and kept glancing around as if afraid of being seen. With this new information, Margaret decided to confront Jeffrey directly. She found him at the site at the end of a workday, with a tense expression and his eyes cast down. "Jeffrey, can I speak with you for a minute?" she called out, her voice firm but trying not to sound accusatory. Jeffrey hesitated before responding, clearly nervous. "Sure, Margaret, what's up?" She looked at him for a few seconds, deciding that a direct approach was best. "I saw you and Amy talking on the day of the accident. What was she doing here?" Jeffrey stammered, visibly uncomfortable. She just came to check on a few things. Nothing major." Margaret knew he was lying. "Jeffrey, I know something is wrong. Robert didn't deserve this, and I need to know the truth. If you have anything to do with what happened, now is the time to come clean." Jeffrey looked around as if searching for an escape, but the pressure of Margaret's words and the guilt consuming him were too much. I didn't want it to turn out this way, Margaret. She made me an offer. I was in debt. I didn't think it would come to this." Jeffrey's words hit Margaret like a punch to the stomach. Amy had really planned everything. "Do you know what this means, Jeffrey? This is an attempt at murder. You could go to jail for this." Jeffrey shook his head, his eyes welling up. I know, but I was desperate. She paid me to cause an accident that wouldn't leave any traces. I never thought Robert would end up like this. Margaret sighed, knowing she now had the evidence she needed. You need to tell the police. Robert deserves justice. With the information in hand, Margaret knew she couldn't waste any more time. She rushed back to the hospital as fast as she could, determined to tell the doctors everything and prepare the report against Amy. However, upon arriving at Robert's room, she found a scene that left her speechless. Robert was waking up. His eyes opened slowly, while the monitors around him beeped, indicating that his brain activity was returning. Margaret rushed to call the doctors, who quickly began to assess him. Robert, can you hear me? One of the doctors asked, checking his vital signs. Robert blinked slowly, still weak but conscious. Margaret felt a wave of relief and emotion flood her chest. He was alive, and now everything Amy had planned would start to unravel. Let's stabilize him first, the doctors instructed, as they attended to Robert with urgency. Margaret stepped back a little, watching everything, with the evidence of the conspiracy still firmly in her hand. As the doctors stabilized Robert, Margaret approached slowly, still incredulous that he had awakened. Robert, with heavy eyes and a weak voice, tried to understand what was happening around him. Margaret, he said, a mix of surprise and confusion on his face. What happened? How long have I been out? Margaret, feeling a mix of relief and urgency, held Robert's hand and smiled. You had an accident, Robert. But the most important thing is that you're here now. How are you feeling? Robert took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. I'm a bit weak, but I'll be fine. Thank you for being here. Margaret sighed and, for a moment, just relished the fact that Robert was alive. But she knew she couldn't waste any time. Her expression shifted to one of seriousness that Robert immediately noticed. Robert, there's something you need to know. It's about Amy. He frowned, confused. Amy? What about her? Margaret looked directly into Robert's eyes, feeling the weight of the words she was about to say. She's not on your side. In fact, Amy planned your accident. Robert stared at her, trying to process the shocking information. She bribed Jeffrey to cause the accident that brought you here. All to get rid of you and take your fortune. Robert closed his eyes, feeling a pain not just physical, but one that came from the heart. I always suspected she was different, but this is much worse than I imagined. Robert took a deep breath, gathering the little strength he had left. We need to expose her, but we can't act impulsively. Margaret agreed, her expression determined. I have the evidence. I confronted Jeffrey and he confessed everything. But we need a plan. Robert thought for a moment, then looked at Margaret with a determination that showed he was still the strong man he'd always been, even after everything. Let's pretend I'm still in a coma. Amy will give herself away if she believes there's no danger. Together, Robert and Margaret explained the situation to the doctors. Upon hearing the account, they were shocked but immediately agreed to help. We're dealing with an attempted murder here, said one of the doctors, aware of the gravity of the situation. But if it's to help Robert and catch this woman, we're in. The plan was set, they would keep Robert in a private room, keep anyone who might notice his recovery away, and wait for the right moment to expose Amy. In the following days, Amy continued her daily visits, growing increasingly confident that she could soon have Robert's life support turned off. During one especially quiet night, she entered Robert's room, making sure no one else was around. With a vacant look, she began to speak, as if unloading years of pent-up frustration. I never loved you, Robert, she said, her voice laced with coldness. This has always been about money. I wanted the wealth, the luxury, the control. You were just a means to an end. Amy went on, unaware that Robert was hearing every word. I did what I needed to get what I deserve. Jeffrey did the dirty work, and now, with you out of the way, I'll be the sole heiress to everything. She gave a small, bitter smile, leaning closer to the bed. "You were always so naive. I thought you'd never figure it out, but it doesn't matter now. Soon, all of this will be mine." It was then that, with a slow and deliberate movement, Robert opened his eyes and stared at Amy. "I always knew you didn't love me," he said with a chilling calmness. Amy recoiled, completely stunned. You're awake." Robert sat up with the help of the bed support. "Yes, Amy. I'm awake and I heard everything." Before Amy could react, Margaret entered the room, accompanied by the doctors and the police, who were already on standby. "I've brought everything we need," Margaret said, presenting the recordings and Jeffrey's testimony, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence. Amy desperately tried to deny everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. "You can't prove anything," she shouted, but she knew she was cornered. Robert, maintaining his composure, simply shook his head. "I always wanted to believe you would change, but now I know you never cared." Amy and Jeffrey were arrested on the spot, charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Robert, finally free from the weight of betrayal, began to rebuild his life, now confident that he was surrounded by loyal people. By his side, Margaret proved to be more than just an ally, she was the strength Robert needed to move forward. Over time, the affection and respect that had always existed between them turned into something deeper. Robert and Margaret began to grow closer, sharing not only the challenge of rebuilding the company but also the desire to build a future together. While Amy paid for her crimes, Robert and Margaret allowed themselves to rediscover life, now guided by a true and sincere feeling, far from the shadows of greed. Together, they proved that love and integrity always prevail, even in the face of the darkest intentions. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.